All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are Inspire Washington, and we're really excited to be able to bring you our virtual Cultural Futures presentation. Before we get started, we would like to thank our headline sponsor, Allen Family Philanthropies, as well as our regional sponsor in King County, For Culture Doors Open.
Inspire Washington acknowledges that we and our cultural partners statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region since time immemorial. We pay respect to their elders, both past and present. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where all of our cultural partners statewide live and work, all of our regions, all of our counties, all of our cities, and our towns. And Inspire Washington expresses its deepest respect for all of these custodians. Of course, actions are stronger than sentiments. So Inspire Washington pledges to advocate for the Tribal Cultural Affairs program in the state legislature next year. And we ask that all of you be great advocates for this amazing program that is bringing funding in a more equitable way to our tribal and native partners. Before we get started, Jesse will
Oh,
share the agenda.
yeah. All right, so this is what we're going to chat about today. I know we have some new folks in our Zoom room today, so we'll give you a little overview of what Inspire Washington is and does and how we support cultural work in all corners of Washington State. And then we will dive right in and talk about the legislative session. We'll talk about the super nerdy things like sales tax that I know you all are excited to hear about. We'll also talk about your role as an advocate, both locally as well as at the state. We're going to brief you on some funding opportunities, and we'll do a little download of the Cultural Access Program in Washington State for those of you who are interested. And of course, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end.
Before we get started, we feel it's always really important to share a little bit about ourselves. Now, of course, I see a lot of friends in the room, so you've heard this before, but of course, we want to make sure that we share a little bit about ourselves to the new folks that have joined us today. Although I'm Manny Kawali, and I'm so honored to be the executive director for Inspire Washington. This is my 8th year. Um, Although now I'm a governmental affairs specialist, I assure you that is not my background. I have been a cultural worker just like all of you. I discovered the joys of theater in high school, and that led to a very productive career where I was a performer and an arts educator, a theater instructor, as well as running a few different theaters over my time. For those of you that work in the heritage field, well, of course, theater is storytelling. So it was no surprise when I was hired by the Wing Museum to be their exhibit developer and their exhibit manager. And I worked on a number of in-museum and external exhibitions and installations telling history as well as sharing art during my time there. For those of you that run a cultural nonprofit, I know why you do it. It's joyful, it's uplifting, it's connecting, and it's so important to your communities. I also know how challenging it is to keep your staff paid, to be able to expand your programs, and to keep the lights on. I've been the executive director for Youth Theater Northwest, the managing director for Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center. But now I'm an advocate and I bring my knowledge of cultural sector work into every place that I represent you. And also, I bring you into the space so you can advocate for yourself. My Washington State story is I'm a third generation Washingtonian. I was born and raised in Seattle, but my family primarily lives in King, Chelan, and Grant counties. And I'll pass it over to Jesse.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Deputy Director for Inspire Washington. I use she, her pronouns. I grew up on Tiger Mountain in East King County, a pretty rural part of the Puget Sound, although it's not so rural now, but it was then. I am a theater kid. I started doing theater when I was about 7 years old and continued to do that throughout my life, mostly as a stage manager. I worked professionally in the Seattle area for many years before going to New York and checking out what they have over there. And then I came back to the Seattle area and started my work as the development director at Youth Theater Northwest along with Manny. So those of you that write grants and raise money and throw galas, boy, do I understand the very challenging nature of that work. I also spent some time in the heritage world at the Jewish Community Center and also as the company manager at Village Theater again. But I'm thrilled to be at Inspire Washington. I've been here for about 4.5 years now. I still live in the Puget Sound area. However, most of my family lives in the beautiful Methow Valley and also down in Walla Walla. I will pass it over to Monica.
Hi, everybody. I'm joining InspireWA from the center of the state in Kittitas County, Ellensburg, where I have been the last 15 years. I started my journey in Washington, um, well, visiting family that is primarily in Puyallup and Bellevue, but as an adult, I moved to Seattle ready to launch my art career, having just graduated in fine arts from Virginia in ceramics, and I found out that being an artist it's a lot harder than I thought. So I ended up joining organizations like Soil Art Gallery in Seattle and started my arts administrator and advocacy career at Artist Trust, where I was for 6 years before moving to Ellensburg to become the executive director of the Visual Arts Center here. I recently retired my executive director career after leaving Icicle Creek Center for the Arts in Leavenworth, and having had those experiences, I feel has made me a much stronger advocate for cultural organizations of all shapes and sizes and in all places. I'm really excited to be here working for InspireWA and for you. Thank you.
Madeline,
Is
would
it
you like to introduce yourself? If you're able.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Dalton. I grew up in Newcastle, Washington, and I did theater at Youth Theater Northwest while Manny and Jesse were both on staff. So we go way, way, way back, and now we're colleagues. Obviously, I'm a theater kid. I studied that in college, but now I'm also a professional jazz musician. And I'm recording my debut album. And I've worked a lot with kids, so I know the power of arts education. I went on tour with Missoula Children's Theater. I've worked a lot as a teaching artist at Youth Theater Northwest. So all aspects of art, music, theater are deeply important to me.
Awesome. And we're really excited to share that very soon a communications coordinator will be joining our team. You can look for that job description, job posting sometime next month. We're excited about that. Manny, you're on mute.
Rats, I was really going to try not to make that mistake this time. Inspire Washington opens doors to science, heritage, and the arts. We are a nonprofit. We are guided by mission. Here it is before you. I'll give you a few moments to read through that. Founded in 2019 with the merger of two organizations, Cultural Access Washington and the historic Washington State Arts Alliance, Inspire Washington is your cultural advocacy organization. We exist to serve every state community, from Spokane to Seattle, from Kennewick to Kitsap, from Wenatchee to Whatcom. We serve communities by supporting all of you, our cultural partners. You are the ones that inspire Washington communities every day in every region with your programs in science, heritage, and the arts. What do we do every day and year round? Coalition building. We are connecting galleries in Friday Harbor with the Symphony in Yakima and music venues in downtown Spokane. We are building a big cultural team and directing our imagination on shared objectives. We're also coordinating with allies like tourism, education, rural investment, and economic development, just to name a few. Advocacy ensures that someone is sticking up for you, the cultural sector, and representing us within every space where decisions are made and our public resources will be distributed. Like with members of Congress when we advocated for pandemic relief, and in state government where we secured funds for the Working Washington Round 5 grant program, as just a few examples. But what's next? What other resources need to be developed so that your work may thrive? Is it money? I'm assuming the answer will always be yes. But let's talk about laws, policy. What things stand in your way and what opportunities should we pursue so that you can continue to thrive in your work? We also know that you crave and rely on community within the industry. Our education programs provide networking and professional development opportunities. And Madeline, our outreach and advocacy coordinator, is always developing toolkits and programming to make your advocacy and communications work easier. We are committed to representing science, heritage, and arts organizations across Washington by spending more time listening, showing up in person, and working in towns and communities across the state. Thank you for joining us today.
So when we say the cultural sector, this is who we mean. At Inspire Washington, we are a really big tent that includes these three buckets. The first being science and technology, which includes nature conservancies, fish hatcheries, zoos, science, innovation centers, and aquariums. Raise your virtual hand if you are here representing science today. I know we have a few. I saw Julia earlier. Yep, there you are.
Fantastic.
And of course, heritage, which includes historical and cultural heritage sites, humanities, and museums. Do we have heritage in the house today? See if there's any Zoom hands being raised for heritage. Well, I know there's some heritage fans out there. And then, of course, the arts, which includes the broad array of the arts, visual arts, literature, music, dance, theater, spoken word, film, and non-commercial radio. I see those arts hands. Awesome.
Over the last number of years, Inspire Washington has made tremendous impact, but there's more that we have to do. To champion greater support for cultural programming, we must start with building greater awareness. Storytelling is one of the most important things we do with you and for you. Storytelling turns adversaries into allies, supporters into active champions, and when you join this effort, your stories may secure the resources you need and build greater awareness about what you do and why it matters to your community. Now, here's a story that I love to tell. It's a little nerdy, but it always opens the ears of policymakers. Did you know that the arts, the cultural sector, and the broad creative economy represents nearly 10% of the state's GDP? Look at that number. $79 billion of state economy, 9.78% of state's GDP, nearing 200,000 jobs. When you take these same metrics and apply them to other states, Washington State ranks #1 in percentage of state GDP. And rigorous studies have shown that students who engage in artistic classes are more likely to graduate. Creative learning drives academic success. These are just a few of the stories that we tell about your work, and I know that when you join the effort, your stories become more personal and more localized to your city and to your town. Join us as storytellers and share these topics with your elected officials, businesses, local media, donors, and the broader community.
At Inspire Washington, we cannot do our work alone. Our partners are woven into the fabric of everything that we do. We collaborate with organizations, government, and advocates every day. We are the thread that brings all three together, that inspires change and creates meaningful experiences that enhances all of our quality of life. Here is a list of our partner organizations. They are cultural businesses like all of you. We have 150 statewide and growing every day. We are a statewide coalition, and with your help, we can represent every community in all 39 counties. If you don't see your organization on this list, no worries. We would love to have you join as a member of Inspire Washington. Our annual dues are very low. For individuals, they start at only $50 a year. For an organization, based on your budget size, dues start at only $100 a year. We'd love to have you join us. This becomes a very powerful list and coalition when we have more people from all over the state. And here is a list of our government partners. This is one of the most valuable aspects of our work. We regularly maintain relationships with lawmakers at every level of government, city, county, state, and federal. We also work with many different divisions of state government on behalf of the cultural sector, as well as many local cultural access programs. And now our advocates. I'd like to take a moment to talk about the most important people, all of you. None of what we do and accomplish could be done without our advocates. You are the backbone of our work, and we are so grateful for your partnership. Advocates participate in action alerts, they sign in and testify for bills, they meet with their lawmakers, and most importantly, provide meaningful cultural programs in every community.
This is a really busy time for Inspire Washington. There are so many objectives that we want to pursue for you within public government, and we will need more advocates to secure some more wins. So right now, I want to talk about the importance of advocacy to inspire you to advocate deeper or to engage in advocacy and to bring more people to the table. Advocacy exists to educate, to enlighten, to illuminate, and to inspire. And advocacy is working in Washington State. Our cultural coalition has delivered significant resources for the sector, but like I said, there's more you need, so we're going to build up our ranks. Here's something that I hear all the time. Manny, I'd love to participate, but I don't really have the bandwidth to learn something new. I understand that sentiment. I cannot take another new app on my phone. But I'm here also to challenge that notion. I believe advocacy is something that you're excellent at and you're already doing. Advocacy is leadership. Every day you represent your cultural work, the communities you serve, the people that work for you, and the positive impact you're making. That is advocacy. Advocacy is relationship building, like the outreach that you're always doing to draw a larger circle of supporters to your work. That is advocacy. Advocacy is also storytelling. Over 200 advocates from Pacific to Pend Oreille counties shared their stories of hardship and resilience to every member of our state legislature during the pandemic. This work inspired them to create the Working Washington Round 5 grant program. Most recently, many advocates reached out to their lawmakers about the impact of ESSB 5814 that expanded retail sales tax. And today we're going to talk more about the successes we secured because of that storytelling. Reach out to your members of Congress, engage and build relationship with your state lawmakers, tell your story, and let's earn the support for more things that you need. Now, I often hear that people think that they're not allowed to advocate while running or representing a nonprofit, and that's not exactly true. If you're a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, certainly there are limitations for how much you may lobby, but advocacy is uniquely different and advocacy is allowed. So let's talk about the difference between the two. To be considered lobbying, you must be doing three things at the same time. One, communicating with a decision maker. Now, that is an elected official or a staff member that represents them at a meeting. Two, you must be discussing existing or potential legislation. And legislation isn't an idea for funding. Legislation is very specific legal language and content that has been registered with the clerk of an elected chamber or council. You can spot legislation a mile away because of its funny names with lots of numbers. For example, House Bill 1234 or Ordinance 5678. That is legislation. Having a conversation about the opportunities you'd like a lawmaker to pursue, that is simply just keeping them informed. The third thing, to be considered lobbying, you must be urging the decision maker to vote in a certain direction, for or against, yes or no on legislation. You need to be doing all three of those things for it to be considered lobbying. But having a conversation about your program, the impact you're making, and ideas you have for the support you may need, that is advocacy, and that is absolutely allowed. In fact, our representative government was structured around that type of activity. Going deeper, the IRS does permit tax-exempt organizations to lobby in limited amounts. It just cannot be a significant portion of your organizational work and therefore a large percentage of your business expenses. So if you're a choir and you're spending more time in Washington, D.C. or in Olympia with Jesse and I and very little time in your rehearsal studio, then perhaps you've crossed a line and you're really now a lobbyist. But just having conversations in those limited amounts, that is fine. Here's a good rule of thumb. Generally, nonprofits may lobby for issues like ballot initiatives, but not in candidate elections. Basically, issues, not people. However, you can support candidates in your personal capacity. That was a lot. But overall, I hope that I've convinced you about the importance of advocacy. In our representative government, advocacy is a critical part of the process. Your lawmakers are elected by your community. They are accountable to you. They want to hear from their voters to know what's important. There are many spaces and places where decisions are made and your public resources will be distributed, like City Council, Chamber of Commerce, County Council, School Board, State Government, Federal Government, and more.
All right, so before we start talking about the state legislative session, I just wanted to take a pause and see if there are any questions about advocacy. No? All right. Well, I'm very excited to talk about the state legislative session because it is the most important time of our year at Inspired Washington. It is our Super Bowl. It is our Nutcracker. It is the one time of year when state laws are created or existing laws are amended. It's also when state government invests all of our tax money. State budgets are compiled, debated, and approved. Washington is divided into 49 distinct geographic districts, and each one elects one senator and two representatives. These members work for you and show up in Olympia every year with your community's needs and interests in mind. The legislative session begins every January, specifically on the second Monday of every January, and runs through March or April. The odd years are called bienniums because the legislature will create a 2-year budget. The even years are called supplemental years because they won't be creating a whole new budget, they'll just be making adjustments to their previous biennium budget. So every year, in anticipation of the legislative session, Inspire Washington creates a list of priorities, things that we specifically as our own nonprofit want to further or work on during the session. We, of course, are a big tent, so we support many of our partners' priorities as well during the session. So we work on those as well. But this year, for 2026, our session priorities was to advance ticketing legislation, to amend that pesky ESSB 5814 on retail sales tax, and also to maintain cultural funding for our state agencies. Our partners' priorities included also maintaining funding. For the Pacific Science Center, it was their Science on Wheels program. This is a really wonderful science education program that travels to 48 of 49 of our legislative districts. Also, the Washington State Historical Society had an ask around improvements for their HVAC system, as well as some accessibility improvements to the State History Museum in Tacoma. The Eastern Washington State Historical Society, they had an ask to create a new staff position in the form of a tribal liaison. We advocated alongside Humanities Washington for their primetime family reading program. Washington Trust, of course, had their Main Street program as well as their other capital grant programs. And ArtsWA was looking to restore their grant funding as well as expanding their creative districts, receive support for their CRM system, and as well as some administrative support.
All right. So now I'm going to talk about engrossed Senate Substitute Bill 5814, which was passed at the end of the 25 legislative session, which expanded retail sales taxes on services. I just want to call out that I recognize the harm and the confusion that this created for all of our cultural partners. There have been a lot of issues over the years that Inspire Washington has had to tackle, but aside from the pandemic-related issues, there was no single topic that I received so much email. At Inspire Washington, we used to joke that when we left our homes, we couldn't go half a block without running into somebody that needed to talk about ESSB 5814. So I recognize the harm it created. We really took this to heart and we did everything we can to make improvements. And there were improvements, not everything we wanted, but definitely we're going in the right direction. So let me unpack all of this for you today. I'm going to start with a little bit of a primer just to make sure everyone is on the same page. So I just told you that the state expanded the retail sales tax on services. What services? Well, actually, it was a long list of services. You can read the bill and see all the things that the state had to decided to tax. But the areas that seemed that had the most impact on cultural programming was live presentations, digital advertising, temporary staffing services, and security. Those are the things we heard about the most. Why did the state legislature all of a sudden tax these services? Well, they had a big budget deficit. They were in kind of a stalemate with the governor and with other members of the legislature about what they were comfortable doing to bring in new revenue to fill the budget hole. And at the very end of the session, they passed engrossed Senate Substitute Bill 5814, which had these provisions for new revenue. What were the cultural impacts? Well, first of all, the confusion. The session ended in April. Of course, words like taxing live presentations would alarm the cultural sector just by the nature of what we do. there were no immediate answers about what would be taxed and would this class be taxed or is a performance tax. And since the state went into the ruling period where the agency, the Department of Revenue, had to figure out the details of the tax, nothing was immediately available. So just the confusion, of course, was a horrible impact for the cultural sector. And there was no clarity until the guidance came out at the end of September for a tax that was going to be implemented on October 1st. We also noted that the impact of the taxes when the guidance started coming out was really varied across the sector. For some organizations that purely focused on performances, since performances was it was decided was not a live presentation, those were not taxed. Those organizations didn't seem to have much of an impact. But a lot of other organizations, of course, that had classes or museums that had lectures, those types of activities, all sorts of things had taxable programming. So it varied across the sector. It was really hard for us to get our arms around to figure out what the trends were so that we could address them clearly. We care about expenses going up for programmings because, of course, we all want our programs to be accessible, and one of the first tactics in doing that is by keeping the cost down. But when the costs go up on programs because now it's taxed, and with tax percent, with retail sales tax being broadly about 10% across Washington. It really depends on where you live. This was a significant increase that would be passed off to the customer, the patron, the student. Of course, there were also services like when you're buying ads or where you're paying for temporary staffing or security for your programs, that all of a sudden those activities, those purchases, those expenses were now taxed, which means that you had increased operational costs on top of skyrocketing inflation. So those were all the cultural impacts, and of course, those impacts was the focus of our storytelling. So what did we do during the off-session time to start advocating for relief? Well, we started taking meetings with lawmakers. Many lawmakers, I have to tell you, did not imagine that this bill, that these taxes would impact cultural businesses to the degree that they did. The vast majority of them told us this was an unintended consequence, but it was a consequence nonetheless. We secured information. We worked with ArtsWA to develop an FAQ. We even hosted a webinar with the Department of Revenue. I know at the time that information was still coming out, and that webinar was somewhat confusing to a number of our cultural partners. But we were doing everything we could to get you to connect our cultural partners with the folks that were making the decisions and implementing the tax. We also were very fortunate because of our advocacy to the chair of the House Finance Committee. We were really fortunate to be to be included in an off-session work study session in the month of December. So in preparation of the state's legislative session, they called together the committee just to hear from different industries about the impact of 5814 so that they could understand what they could be inspired to do technical fixes in the upcoming session. At the time of the hearing, it wasn't a hearing. At the time of this work study session, they were not in legislative session, so they could not fix anything, but it was really important for us to get our concerns across. Okay, that's the context. Let's talk about what happened. Well, we did get some fixes to 5814, and it came through two bills. And I'm going to talk about the two different bills and kind of the distinctions between the two, and then hopefully I'm going to inform you about some relief that you're going to get. The first bill, Engrossed Senate Substitute Bill 6113, originated in the Senate chamber. This was agency-crafted legislation. So what does that mean? Well, during the ruling period, the Department of Revenue had to make decisions about what they thought the legislature and what was legally required from the bill, what the legislature intended with the bill. And although they felt confident with a lot of their decisions, they wanted to make sure that when they said that performances weren't taxed and and the long list of guidance, and that summer camps weren't taxed. They wanted to make sure that those would hold firm. So therefore, they crafted this bill to basically enshrine all of the decisions they made during the ruling period into the law, so that there'd be no more confusion, and that their decisions would be solid, perennial. Um, so what does that mean? Well, that means that the things that we still want in the law, we could not, those were not in 6113, because that went beyond what the Department of Revenue had the authority or the leadership to do. They couldn't craft bigger solutions. They just had to address what they did. So here is the definition of live, the amended definition of live presentations from 6113. You can read through that. A lot of this just lines up with what you already had been told, but that was important, right? And I want to bring your attention to the highlighted section in letter E. Presentations given at the physical location of a facility exempt from property tax. And then it cites an RCW. Now, that's language that cultural nonprofits are used to hearing, because there is an RCW that means that says you don't have to pay retail sales tax for programs at your tax exempt property. But I want to call out that this is a different RCW. This is specific to those properties that are the homes for a non-profit place of worship by a recognized religious denomination. In fact, the RCW calls out churches, convents, parsonages. So that is different. Unless, of course, you're a cultural program that rents space in a church, well, then you're really lucky. You do not have to pay the tax based off of this law. But I just want to call that out because there was some misunderstanding about who they were, what properties they were talking about. So ESSB 6113 became law when the governor signed it on March 30th. The amendments in this bill were backdated to October 1st. So that just kind of solidifies that the Department of Revenue gave accurate guidance. But of course, there's more relief that you needed, because there was still a lot of cultural programs tax despite this amendment. So I want to go to the next bill. All right, surprise. The millionaire's income tax bill is not just about that millionaire's income. It actually has a number of other chapters. Engrossed Senate Substitute Bill 6346 also had language that amends the definition of live presentations. And here is where we got the broader relief that we were in pursuit of. I'm going to bring your attention right to letter B. Presentations given by a nonprofit organization exempt from federal income tax under Title 26 USC Codes, Section 501C. So this means that all nonprofits of any kind, 501c3s, 501c4s, 501c6s, there are actually other types of 501cs, all of them, their live presentations are exempted from paying retail sales tax. I have to tell you, this was harder than we thought it was. We started the legislative session asking for a nonprofit exemption. At the very beginning, we were told that would be very difficult because the state was really counting on that revenue. Therefore, it's not so odd that this new definition would be in the millionaire's income tax bill, because that's what balances it. The state sees that, like, you know what, we have new revenue coming down the road. This is an area that we can actually give back and not count on that revenue. There was also other things that was advocated for. Look at letter C. Yes, we already knew that performances were not taxed, but that including any incidental instruction, because there was a lot of questions about rehearsals, and especially rehearsals for tuition-based programs seem to fall in the snare, or at least a real big confusion within the law. So that was important. Also, I'm going to bring you down to E, but also it kind of reflects on D as well. Music lessons, regardless of the number of participants. You may recall that the guidance that was received last October said that if you taught one student, you had to pay the tax. If you had multiple, no, it's the opposite. If you had multiple students, there was just a difference. And this clarifies that music lessons, regardless of the number of participants, is not subject to retail sales tax. That was the result of an incredible amount of advocacy that happened from our cultural partners that provide music programs. Also, schools were exempted. So therefore, when schools purchase your programs, they no longer have to pay retail sales tax, which of course kind of stood as a barrier to access. They sometimes just couldn't afford purchasing your programs because of the added cost. So ESSB became law when the governor signed on March 25th. These amendments take effect on July 1st. So if you've had to pay retail sales tax on your programs, that will continue, but we see light at the end of the tunnel. You don't have to do that come July 1st. Many people ask me, why July 1st? That seems arbitrary. Not at all. That is the beginning of the state's next fiscal year. So they just had to, work with the budget that they had for the end of this fiscal year and start fresh. What wasn't fixed during the session? Well, temporary staffing services and security taxes on those are currently subject to retail sales tax, but in the millionaire's income tax bill, those will sunset at the end of 28. So there's relief coming down the road, but we're going to keep trying to see if we can get that relief earlier. The sales and use taxes for advertising services, digital advertising, and there's kind of a long definition of all the ways that digital advertising is taxed. That is still on the books. I know that that's creating a tremendous amount of hardship for organizations of all sizes. The new fees, the new tax that you pay on that. What's at play with that? Well, they didn't actually include that yet because of the fact that there's a lawsuit. Comcast is suing the state of Washington on that provision within 5814. It goes to trial in January. If the Supreme Court agrees with Comcast that 5814 discriminates against digital advertising, then that will be struck. That provision will be struck and you won't have to pay that tax. So we're going to look towards that lawsuit. And again, we will be advocating for relief if that still sticks. The last thing I want to say is a question I get from a lot of people. Manny, I'm reading the news. I know that there's a lawsuit against the millionaire's income tax bill. If that lawsuit wins, do we lose all of these provisions? And the answer is no. You are safe. There is a severability clause within the millionaire's income tax bill that means that the different chapters stand separate. So these solutions are enduring. They are perennial. Even if I don't know what's going to happen with the millionaire's income tax portions of that bill, but regardless, these will stay law in Washington. That was a lot of heady information. I hope that I was able to lead you through that to get you to a clear place. I will take your questions, but before I do, I just want to say one thing. Inspire Washington is an advocacy organization. So therefore, where we put our attention and focus and understanding is around the effect of legislation. But I am not a tax attorney, and you should not take any of thing that I tell you as direct guidance or direction on whether you should pay tax or not. We really encourage you to seek out a tax attorney or to reach out to the Department of Revenue and ask for a ruling for any specific situation that you're in. I hear that the turnaround time is about 10 days. I can certainly give you my opinions on things, but again, just as a disclaimer, because we're talking about the law and we're talking about money, that I cannot give you concrete and specific guidance or direction on whether something is taxable or not.
Any
Question?
questions? You can always put your question in the chat too if it's easier to articulate something there, or if you think about it later.
I hope that all makes sense. I know this is a really heady topic, but it really comes down to some really basic things. You want to keep your programs affordable. You don't want to pay retail sales tax so that because you're already dealing with skyrocketing inflation. So I hope I've been able to break this down for you. And I really want to just call out that this was a big win. It was something that we were told that we had to temper expectations for, a nonprofit exemption. So we're really thrilled. And it only happened because so many advocates participated. I also want to say that I understand that cultural sector programming is broad. that nonprofit exemption does not include relief for those important independent gig artists or LLCs that are doing work because they're not nonprofits, and that matters to us. But this is what the legislature was willing to do right now. It's also really hard to draw a definable boundary around commercial, creative, cultural programming that doesn't also open the door for other types of stuff. So we're going to keep having that conversation because that work matters to us. And specifically, who do I want to thank for this huge win of a nonprofit exemption? Representative April Berg. She's the chair of the House Finance Committee. She was always on our side about this and very responsive. And specifically, the Senate tasked her with when they directed the millionaire's income tax bill to the House chamber, it was her committee that needed to get it out of committee. And that's a really hard slog. And apparently, April also wanted something out of that as well. And that's why she put these provisions, which actually make a lot of sense because it is about revenue. She put it in the millionaire's income tax bill. That was something that she was able to pull off. Because she cared. So thank you, Representative April Berg, and all the lawmakers that voted on it. And there's a whole long list. I could name them a whole bunch, but I won't right now. But I think that deserves calling out. Hi, Rebecca.
Sorry, my cat just decided to run over me at that very moment. Little rat. I was curious to know, I know a number of people who are fiscally sponsored by Shunpike arts organizations. I'm thinking specifically of a friend who teaches playwriting classes as a fiscally sponsored group. I think she's with Shunpike now. Are they exempted? I mean, or are fiscally sponsored organizations not included in any of this?
That's a really good question and an important one. Again, I'm going to share my opinion, but not legal advice. I mean, I think generally regarding fiscal sponsorships and the way that those normally act as a vehicle or sometimes a shelter for organizations, it seems as if they would, but that's a very good specific question. No one has asked me that one yet, so gold star for you, Rebecca. And I will find out an answer for that, so that we can share that in future.
Joe might have an answer for me here.
Oh, yes. Hi, Joe.
Hi, all. So totally depends on what type of fiscal sponsorship that organization is engaged with. Model A, where they absorb the organization underneath the 501c3 umbrella, would allow for that. However, Model C, where it's a re-granting, a pre-approved re-granting relationship, you're still two separate entities, so that 501c3 doesn't come into play, so you wouldn't have that advantage.
Does it make a difference with Shunpike? Because a lot of those people have the basic as opposed to the advanced.
Yeah, the basic is Model C, which is where two separate legal entities. So that's where it wouldn't come into play. But Model A, where it's absorbed under the 501c3 umbrella of Shunpike, it would.
Thanks.
Well, I would really like to learn more about this. So please encourage anyone that has questions to reach out to me. I will certainly include this in my list of topics to discuss with our lobbyists and with Department of Revenue. Well, here's something we also know. When there's big legislation passed, there's always unintended consequences, and often legislation is not perfect. So I do imagine there will be a technical fix bill for ESSB 6346 in the next legislative session. It's a lot easier to make amendments than it is to craft a bill. So we can certainly, based off of what we hear, and if there's something that we can form into an ask of the legislature as an amendment to be able to include cultural sector partners that are umbrella, then we would certainly pursue that. But I need to learn a lot more about that first. Great. Now this is how we do things together, people. You guys understand. You are all doing the programming, so you know where the real rub is. And that's why your stories and your collaboration are so important.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it looks like we've got some in the chat
Oh, okay,
here if
great.
you want to pop over there.
Okay.
Maybe you could read it, Madeline?
Sure. Let's go ahead and start with Oliver T's question. If we have classes that start in July, but students often buy early, will they have to pay the tax?
Um, sorry, can you say that again? Sorry, I got distracted by another comment.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry.
If we have classes that start in July, but students often buy, like, sign up for the class
Oh,
before
sure.
July, will they have to pay the sales tax?
Yeah, that question has come up a lot, and this is where I think you do have to pursue a very specific ruling. So I'm only going to give you my opinion or where I would, how I would start to flag it in my brain. I certainly understand the practice of that. I worked at Youth Theater Northwest. We sold a lot of summer camps that started in the month of July and continued through the summer. And of course, some parents were always registering early because they want to make sure they lock down their students' calendar. So that's a normal thing. And of course, this law doesn't really respond to the practical realities of cultural programming calendaring, but there will be an effect. I believe that this might go into the world of taxable work because the Department of Revenue is looking for a contract. Remember, that was a big part of the guidance they provided in October. Like, when did the contract become initiated? And using what a contract is in this case is the purchase of the services, right? So I think that's something that you have to talk to the Department of do a specific ruling request on, or craft that question. If you're afraid of putting a target on you, send it to me and I'll do a ruling request and share the answer with you afterwards. If there's maybe perhaps a safe harbor is payment plans or some way of being able to collect the revenue in July. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for that. Great, we got the answer to Tanya's question, it looks like in the chat. We are, okay, actually, that other question that Tanya had. We are an arts nonprofit and we employ contractors, teaching artists. Thank you. Teaching artists need work for in-person class art lesson. Yeah, so you're an arts nonprofit. So therefore, you would not, when people are registering for the classes, you would not add retail sales tax for your live presentation on top of that. I think, and if the let's say it's a school, I'm trying to think of all the ways that this question may apply. If a school is purchasing your programming, right, where you hire these teaching artists, they're exempt. So in those cases, yes, you would be exempt from it. Okay, we answered the question that Oliver had. Good to see you, Jet City Improv. And my heart is full, Ray. Of course. So many of us theater kids still doing all the things, and we love you at Braided River. Okay, are there any questions I missed?
At the moment, doesn't look like it. And
Okay.
thanks to everyone who's giving all the information and knowledge that they also know and sharing that in the chat. That's what we love to see.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for this conversation. Reach out to me if you have further questions, and let's all work through the off-session time. And during the next legislative session, let's get more relief from retail sales tax to ensure that we keep your costs down, but most importantly, so we keep the participant costs down to make arts, science, and heritage as accessible as possible in Washington State.
Okay, I'm going to go through how the budget all landed at the end of the session for our four cultural agencies, the state agencies that provide cultural programming. So Artswa, we're really thrilled that they were allocated some additional funding to complete the Billy Frank Jr. statue project. Due to some inflation as well as transportation costs, they requested some additional funding to complete this. Just as a little bit of background, for those of you who don't know, over in the other Washington and Statuary Hall, every state in the nation is represented by two statues. There's one in Statuary Hall and then at the home capital, whatever state that is. And for the last several years, Washington State has been represented by Marcus Whitman. But now, very soon, we will be represented by Nisqually hero Billy Frank Jr. So this statue has been created, and we hope that in September, those two statues will be switched. So that's really exciting. But as you can imagine, it's very expensive to move a 3-ton statue all the way across the country, especially with gas prices being what they are. So they asked for a small amount of additional funding to complete that project. So they were allocated that. So that's wonderful. There was some funding allocated for their rent increase as well as some staff retirement buyouts. The bad news is that there will be a cut of $300,000 to ArtSWA's overall grants budget. We're grateful that it wasn't the initial $600,000 that was proposed by the governor. Thanks to all of your work as advocates, we were able to cut it back by half, which is wonderful. We've been in conversation with the staff over at ArtSWA, and they're going to do everything they can to keep this cut out of grants to organizations as well as all the arts education programs. They know those are the most important programs that people really rely on, so they're going to do their best to figure that out. More to come. This cut does not take effect until the beginning of their fiscal year, which is July 1. So they're still kind of working out how that will play out. Also, their request for a full-time employee to manage their Salesforce, their CRM system, was not funded, but I believe they'll be asking for that again next year. The Washington State Historical Society, also known as the Washington History Museum down in Tacoma, they were provided level funding in the budget, which is great. They were also allocated in the capital budget $325,000 for accessibility improvements to the museum in Tacoma, which is great. But the request for a new chiller was not included, but they will be requesting that again next year. The Eastern Washington State Historical Society, which is our state history agency over on the other side of the state, in Spokane, they were provided funding for that tribal liaison position that they requested, which is wonderful. So that person will start in July. The Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, they're the agency that runs the Main Street program, which I know is super popular all across Washington. They also manage a lot of the state historic capital grants, like the historic theater grants and the historic grants for barns and cemeteries and things like that. They were provided level funding, which is great, but they were also provided an additional $175,000 to develop a model ordinance that local governments can use to protect archaeological and cultural resources when development may impact places of importance to local history, as well as federally recognized tribes. So we're really excited about this. I'm really interested by this. I think this will become a really great tool for local governments to use all over the state. So this, much like everything else, will start on July 1. So we'll start to see something come out of this project probably in the fall or winter. Any questions about the budget? No. Okay, great. All right, so now this is the time in the year where we're now looking to all of you to provide guidance and your insight as to our next year's legislative session. So on this slide, we have a list of the things that we are interested in pursuing for the next session, some ideas, and we would love to know what you all think of them. What are the most important things to you in your community? What maybe doesn't resonate as much with you this year? So we're going to go through some of these now. As you can probably imagine, of course, continued sales tax relief is high on our agenda for digital advertising, temporary services, and security. Also, ticketing legislation, which Manny is going to talk about on our next slide. The overtime threshold issue. I'll just give a little overview about this in case folks are new to this idea. So about 10 years ago, the legislature, in partnership with the Department of Labor, passed a chart that said of each year how much the increase was for non-exempt employees, salaried employees. So this started long ago, before we had a pandemic, before we had inflation and all these things. And by 2028, the chart says that a salaried employee, a non-exempt employee, must make a minimum of $93,000 in Washington State, or otherwise they must be considered an hourly employee and therefore subject to overtime. As you can imagine, this is a complicated issue, right? Of course, we want to support employment equity and what workers deserve all across the state, but also we know that that may be a very challenging number for a lot of nonprofits across Washington. The cost of living really varies in Washington, but depending on where you live. So this could just be an issue that could really jeopardize a nonprofit business. I also want to say that that $93,000 is not specifically for nonprofits. It's for all for-profit or nonprofit, any company that has 50 or less employees all across Washington. And like I said, this also is a chart that was created about 10 years ago. So what we intend to do at Inspire Washington during this next legislative session and also in the interim is just do kind of education and listening sessions with members of the legislature as well as advocates across the state. So folks understand that this is an issue and we need to come together and talk about a solution. At Inspire Washington, we do not have that solution right now, but we know that it's really important that we start talking about it. So we just want to bring that to folks' attention and really highlight it as an issue for a lot of our nonprofit organizations. So that's another potential objective. Space incentive. We have heard for a couple years now that cultural space, places where science, heritage, and the arts can happen all across Washington, or is at a minimum. There's just not enough space for you to do your important programs. There's not enough space for storage, for classes, for performances, for exhibits, whatever it is. But we also know that mostly due to COVID, that there is a lot of empty spaces that are not being utilized. I'm thinking about places of worship that are maybe only used a couple days a week, or empty office buildings, things like that. Wouldn't it be really great if there was an incentive that made it more appealing for those places of worship and empty office buildings to rent to nonprofits or cultural programs for a discounted rate? So that's kind of the idea we have, and we'd love to talk more to the legislature about what those opportunities could be. Next year is a biennium year, meaning Building for the Arts and Heritage Capital will once again be up on the agenda. So we will be advocating for full funding of both of those programs. It is not a guarantee every biennium that they will allocate all of the funding that's available. We still have to advocate for that every year, particularly this year, because we will be having a new chair of the capital budget. We have long loved and been so taken care of by Representative Steve Theringer, but he is retiring this year. So we need to pay extra attention to those two programs this next year. We believe that Representative Lisa Callan will be the new chair. It's yet to be determined. She's always been a big supporter, especially of heritage. So we feel fairly good about it, but nothing is secure. There is still an election that must happen. Committees still must be decided, all that. So it's just something we're going to be paying a little more attention to this year than we have in the past. And also, given that the revenue forecasts have been a little bit better, we are excited to start talking about potential expanded funding for our cultural agencies. For the last couple of years, with the really devastating budget forecast, we've just been saying, let's hope for level funding, right? No cuts, no growth, just level funding. Well, this year, we feel like we could start talking about an increase to our cultural agencies. So more to come on that, especially with once we see a few more budget forecasts. But that's what we're hoping for.
All right. So ticketing legislation. This was as Jesse said, it was one of our priorities this year, and we were able to take a few steps forward. We didn't get all the way. It's a very rigorous process to get a bill to be made law. Up to 6 committees and 2 chambers that vote on it. But I do feel like we made some incredible progress in this last legislative session. I want to brief you a little bit on it and talk about some things that we want to do during the off-session time. So yes, so what are we trying to do? We are in pursuit of ticketing legislation to make sure that the costs of cultural presentations and performances remain affordable, and to ensure that you, as the producers of these events, control the costs and are receiving the lion's share of any funds that are collected for programs. You all know what I'm talking about. You've seen the news before. Second party ticket sellers have inserted themselves in a ticketing transaction. They can do this in a really impactful way because of software, bots, right? It's very different than if somebody purchased tickets and stood in front of a cultural venue in the 70s or 80s or even the 90s and just had like 10 tickets that they were trying to sell at an inflated price. Now, because all of these transactions happen online, they can intercept all sorts of sales, and they can drive up the price, and they can commit fraud. There are many consumers that don't realize that they are purchasing a ticket that has been inflated. Often they think that they are purchasing it from a producer. So I know that last year there was a lot of conversation about the Taylor Swift bill, and I really want to talk about it on a really more understandable and personal level. My niece was in a youth production of Into the Woods. She played the witch. I was very proud of her. The tickets I had heard were less than $20. I went online. I was kind of just careless. I typed in some words, and all of a sudden there I was on a platform that pretended to be the organization. I mean, that's the way it appeared to be, the organization that was putting on the event, but the ticket wasn't under $20. It was $150, and that was outrageous. Now, I knew enough because I understand the insidious nature of second party ticket sellers. I knew what had happened. I'd been redirected to a different site. They were trying to sell me an inflated ticket. I also knew that they did not have that ticket. That was a speculative ticket. Now, if I had followed through with the transaction that many cultural customers do, they have now paid an inflated ticket price. They also have developed their own feelings about how much their local cultural organization is charging for tickets, right? And what may happen when I show up at the venue is that since that was a speculative ticket and the software now has to go and purchase a ticket for me, that there may not be a ticket at the door, that there may have not been availability, or worse, if I needed an accommodation, that information would not be translated. So imagine the mayhem that happens at our cultural venues and institutions all the time because of all of these practices of second party ticket sellers. So it is our objective to rein in this market, to control the cost of tickets, and to ensure that your organizations are not being taken advantage of. Now, there has been some movement in the federal government. The bill that we like the most is the one that's been crafted by NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association. By the way, they were a critical partner in the Shuttered Venue Operating Grant lobbying that happened during the pandemic. They've crafted a bill called Fix the Ticks. We think it really goes and addresses a lot of the problems that we want to have addressed. There's another bill that our own Senator Maria Cantwell has introduced called the Ticket Act. We don't feel that bill is quite ready to be baked, that there's still more improvements to really speak to the needs of small cultural businesses in Washington State. So we feel there's more work there. However, we're not really going to bet on these horses right now. You watch the news, it's a challenging place, the federal government, for legislation. So until then, us at Inspire Washington, and much like our partners in other states like California and Maryland, we're seeking state legislation. So what happened over the last biennium? Well, Senator Liz Lovelet sponsored Senate Bill 6175. That legislation was for the WAVE Act. The WAVE Act was crafted by ArtsWA, and we were a partner also with the Washington Nightlife and Music Association in moving that bill forward. We had some tremendous advocacy for the hearing of that bill. We had over 200 advocates who reacted to our newsletters and action alerts, signed in pro. That was incredible. We also had a wonderful list, a long list of testifiers who testified primarily virtually and talked about the challenges they're facing and their need for a solution from the state. There was also testimony from the second party ticket sellers. At that point in the legislative calendar, we were really getting very close to the deadline for bills to leave the policy committee, and there was still a lot of misunderstanding and education that needed to be done with the voting members of that Senate committee. So because of that, we just couldn't make the deadline. In the odd number years, the session is shorter, and you just have very little time to meet every legislative hurdle. So we did not get our bill beyond committee, but we're going to be working with Artswa and with Wanma and our partner, Senator Lovelet, who really wants to roll up her sleeves on this issue to figure out how we can prepare the bill as best as possible so that we can really get to legislative success in the 27 legislative session. There was another bill that was introduced the year before in the biennium. Representative Reeves introduced House Bill 1613. That had a hearing in the first year in 2025. There was no activity in 2026. So we're going to be reaching out to her and figuring out what her interest is in this policy area. And we've also heard from at least one other lawmaker right now that really wants to be a champion on this issue. So there's a lot of conversation. You're going to be hearing more about that. That's the summary. What can you do? Well, we know at Inspire Washington, we try to attack a problem in a variety of different ways. There are existing laws on the books around bots that we feel that if we have the Attorney General's office working or putting some focused attention on, that we might be able to make some improvements until we get broad legislation passed. So our lobbyist took a meeting with the Attorney General's office, and this is what she heard. There was a lot of sympathy about like, wow, this is awful. I mean, tell me more about the person who paid $1,200 for that ticket. However, of course, the Attorney General's office can only really respond when they have verified complaints. So on the screen here, you see a QR code where this QR code goes to the Attorney General's office. It's where consumers can file complaints. They do want to work with us, but they need to see more complaints from Washington State residents about the problem. So please share this QR code over the summer and into the fall. We're really going to be pushing. We're going to develop a whole campaign. We're going to share some artwork that you can put on your websites or in your programs or on social media. We want to get people to complain, and the complaints can be from the businesses that were impacted because of folks showing up and claiming that they had a ticket. I mean, all of the harm in that world, as well as the harm to the consumer who paid too much. Just in our one of our King County stops on Vashon Island, we heard of a Washington State Supreme Court judge who had paid a ridiculous amount for a ticket because his purchase was intercepted. So we know this is happening. We just need to make to log those stories. So more on this later. This is a complicated issue, but it's really going to be a big focus of our legislative session. We are tired of talking about the problems of tickets in Washington. We only want to start talking about success and the fair ways that our businesses, our cultural partners, and our customers and patrons are being treated.
All right, so now it is time for us to stop talking and for you to share your thoughts. Do these objectives resonate with you? Why or why not? Are there things that we are not thinking about that should be on our radar? Do you have any new ideas? Go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and share any thoughts you have about this list of potential 2027 legislative agenda.
And if you don't feel like talking out loud, just throw it in the chat. We're also
for sure.
monitoring
There's
that.
always the chat. Mhm.
Yep. Seen and heard, Rebecca, of course. Are there incentives for the creation of performance venues? Yes, all across Washington. Our communities lack enough spaces to create and also to celebrate history and to learn more about science by supporting their curiosity. Thank you, Ray. We'll have more to share about our work plan around ticketing. We're just in the stages of listening right now and kind of developing a list of potential legislative champions and tasks and activities to really educate our lawmakers. But reach out
All
if you
right.
want to talk more about that.
Yeah. I'll keep us moving through the slide deck, but please, if you have any thoughts about any of these items, things that really speak to you, things that you don't really feel are necessary for the cultural sector right now, please share it in the chat, and we'll be sure to track that. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about your role as an advocate within all this work.
All right. Gosh, that list. All these great ideas and these things are important, and we're going to need more advocates to do this. So, what I'm about to talk about is ways to get more advocates into the circle. I could be speaking to you to deepen your advocacy work, or maybe perhaps some of the ideas I share are ways that you will talk about the need for advocacy so that we can bring some folks in your network into this space. Because, of course, we can lead on this issue, but the legislature represents the entire state, and they're not going to make a decision because the guy from Seattle has an idea. They need to hear from all of you. So whether your year of advocacy consists of filling out a couple I-alerts or attending every single event we just outlined, advocacy feels very rewarding. You get to educate your lawmaker. They don't know what it's like to be a cultural worker, and you get to be the one to tell them. Often your stories about the impact of culture in your local community will resonate so strongly with lawmakers that they'll bring these stories to the voting floor. We love hearing your story shared with every member of the legislature during these critical debates. As an advocate, you get to be the voice for your community. When you take a meeting with your lawmaker, you're representing countless other cultural supporters in your district as well. Passing laws and achieving goals is very tangible on the local level, but only if we come together. When we are a united front, we are unstoppable. Our legislative wins and the many cultural access programs around the state are proof of this. You'll also meet wonderful people, passionate people like you when you advocate. Attending AHS Week, putting together small groups of advocates for off-session meetings, lunches, or coffees with your lawmakers, and attending cultural futures like you are doing today are great ways to meet like-minded folks. Your lawmakers can help you too. Building a lasting relationship with them will set you up for success should you need a sponsor for a local community project that is funding for a capital program, or if you want them to sponsor a budget proviso to bring you programmatic funding.
Here we've created this year-round state advocacy calendar. We hear a lot of folks are like, what am I supposed to do now that, in off-session time? So we've created this calendar. For May and June, your task is to attend the Cultural Futures Tour. So give yourself a pat on the back. You've done May and June. Check. For July and August and even into September, we're launching a summer show and tell campaign. This is new to Inspire Washington. What a summer show and tell will be is when you meet with your lawmaker, you show and tell what is happening in your work or at your organization, or maybe with a group that you're really passionate about. Or you just have coffee with them. Get to know your lawmaker. That is what is important during the summer. And we're going to be creating some template email letters to invite them, as well as some talking points of things to discuss and so just some other opportunities of conversation for you to utilize. We know that sometimes folks are a little nervous about meeting with their lawmaker, but we will make it very easy and friendly and approachable. So the summer show and tell is going to go on through the end of September. And then in October, we'll be doing some advocacy webinars, and we will begin recruiting volunteers for our Arts, Heritage, and Science Advocacy Week. November, we will continue recruiting those advocates. We'll also be doing some webinars, some additional webinars for training. And for those of you who would like to flex your leadership muscle a little bit more, we will be doing district leader training. We will need 49 district leaders for all of our legislative districts, or perhaps more if folks want to become co-district leaders. That's perfectly okay as well. And then it all culminates in January and February. The first week of January, we do our All In for Advocacy online rally, where we bring advocates from all over the state together in a Zoom room, much like this. And we kind of unveil the legislative agenda, both for us as Inspire Washington, as well as all of our other cultural partners will be there to talk about the things they're going to be advocating for as well. All of our teams will be doing their prep and little rehearsals for their lawmaker meetings throughout January. And then the very first week of February is Arts, Heritage, and Science Week down in Olympia, as well as virtual that whole week. March and April, the legislative session is still happening. So we will be continuing to send you action alerts for bills or budget items that need to be moved or stopped for that matter. And also we encourage you to testify for bills or sign in pro for bills. Speaking of Arts, Heritage, and Science Week, I want to do a little bit of an additional plug for this important program. It is the entire first week of February. Next year, the in-person day in Olympia is February 3rd. We highly encourage you to come. It's really fun. Look at our smiling faces. We always have such a good time together in Olympia. This last year, we had over 250 people participate in AHS Week. They did 118 meetings with 117 lawmakers. It was a great time. We even have a bus now, which will shuttle you between our home base location and to the Capitol. So in case you have accessibility needs, or honestly, if it's just rainy and gross and cold, and you don't want to walk 15 minutes to the Capitol, we have you covered. So please keep a lookout for registration. That'll be coming soon.
One other thing, of course, we always want to call out is the Inspiration League. It is an easy way to advocate. Our online platform is there to connect you with your lawmakers. At Inspiration League headquarters, we're always scanning the horizons for threats and opportunities. And when we see something and we need mass advocacy directed at policymakers, we send out an action alert. It goes right to your phone. And within a few clicks, you can send a personalized letter to your lawmaker expressing how you would like them to vote or support an opportunity or deflect something. We know that we agree that democracy is super important, so we always do our best to provide a lot of information. You should make up your own mind. And sometimes we also know that some people don't read all the information. They're just ready to send a letter because they're well informed. We create a template letter. You can edit the whole thing. You may disagree with us at Inspire Washington. That's okay. What matters is we are connecting to your lawmaker, and you can express your opinion to them. So you can edit on the right side, you see kind of what it looks like. You can edit the bulk of the letter. We ask everyone to personalize the letter. Always include a paragraph about who you are, where you live, what you do, so that the lawmaker knows that bots are not generating this thing and that it's really a letter from a constituent that really, really matters. So there you have it. Within 2 clicks, an email is sent out to your lawmaker, and those emails matter. They count them. For every email they receive, they know there are hundreds, if not thousands, of constituents that will not take the time to share their opinion on a subject, but carry the same viewpoint that is being shared with the lawmaker through your letter. So let's get more people registered in the Inspiration League. It's super simple. Share this with everyone. Please post it in your social media and everything. Let's build. There are a lot of people that will not take a meeting with a lawmaker, but they're happy to advocate through email. We need more people like that. There's various ways that people can advocate. All right. So now we're going to start talking about some funding opportunities that are really important to the cultural sector. The upcoming legislative session is a biennium, and every biennium the state disperses grants through their capital programs. So there are 2 key capital programs that serve the cultural sector. First is Heritage Capital Program. These are funds for capital projects at places that celebrate Washington State legacies. So we are talking about museums, historical archives, historical societies, or even historical places themselves. The state legislature has the authority to provide grants totaling $10 million per biennium. The maximum grant award is $1 million. Who administrates this program? Well, that would be the Washington State Historical Society. that program is the outreach is run by Jay. If you are interested in this, I have to tell you that you've missed the deadline. There was a pre-application deadline earlier in the spring, and the final proposals are due on June 5th. But that's okay. These grants are big, they are complicated, they are a lot of work. I want to make sure that I get this on your radar so that you are prepared because there will be another application 2 years from now. So that will give you time to do all the preliminary planning so that you can put the best proposal forward. Talk to Jay early so that she can help you develop the best proposal. Building for the Arts, gosh, nearly 30 years of Building for the Arts has invested millions and millions and millions of dollars into creative spaces, places that celebrate art or where community members can explore their creativity. The program is authorized to disperse grants totaling $18 million per biennium, and these funds may be used for the purchase, the new construction, or the major renovations of arts and creative spaces. The maximum grant award is $2 million. There is no minimum. So if you have a small project like $40,000 or any project of any size, this program can fund. The grant must only cover up to 33% of total project costs. Over the years, we've had successful advocacy that has made the application the program less competitive by reducing some of the onerous matching requirements. The application window has opened right now, and you may apply through July 9th. If you'd like to talk to anyone about this program is administered by the Department of Commerce. The grant selection committee is led by ArtsWA. If you want to learn more, just a really quick Google, just Google Washington State Department of Commerce Building for the Arts. You'll get to the webpage and reach out and talk to the program specialist soon so that they can help you develop a fantastic proposal.
All right, and now I'm going to talk about another opportunity, which is local community projects. This is not a grant in the sense that you go to a website and you apply for it. It is a sponsored reimbursable style grant. So you have to have a member of the legislature sponsor you through this program. So what it is, it's available to any local government entity as well as nonprofits. So think the city pool or the local Boys and Girls Club can also tap into this fund. It's specifically for capital projects, so not program funding. It's distributed by the Department of Commerce through the capital budget. We've seen a pretty wide variety of funds be allocated to programs for this, anywhere between $50,000 to $2 million per business. The requirements are pretty simple. You must have a capital project. And you must have site control. So either you own the building and the property or you have a lease of a minimum of 10 years. The other thing to note about this opportunity is that it is a reimbursable style grant. But the Department of Commerce does allocate a 2-year look back as well as a 2-year look forward. So oftentimes what organizations will do is when they get into this program in their budget, they will include things that they have already done and have already paid for. So as soon as they get into the program, they will apply for reimbursement on those things that they've already paid for and then use those funds to kind of pay it forward to do the next chunk of work for their projects. So that's usually how this kind of thing works. But I must impress upon you that you must be sponsored by either your senator or one of your representatives to be considered for this opportunity. And that all comes from relationships, for you to get on their radar, for them to get excited about your project, for them to come and see it and really visualize and get interested in it. So those summer show and tell will really make a big difference if this is something that you're interested in. But we support organizations every year through these LCPs. So if you're interested in this opportunity, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to coach you through it. I think now, given that we are in so many different parts of the state, I think this is a great opportunity just to highlight some funding opportunities that are available to everyone in the state or to most regions, and also just an opportunity to kind of open your mind as to some other opportunities that you might not have been aware of that are available in your region. So I encourage you to look into if your city or town has a lodging tax, if you have a 1% for the art program, if there are any community foundations that allocate funding for the type of work that you do. Does your city or county have a cultural access program that maybe you've not heard of yet? Is there city funding? Any other county funding? Do you get, especially if you're a historical organization, do you get funding through your document fee bill? Also, just let folks know we're really excited that Arts Fund and the Allen Family Philanthropies will be doing the Community Accelerator Grant again this year. I believe that application, I believe, is opening at the beginning of July. Will be the fourth year in a row that they'll be allocating $10 million to cultural businesses. So I will say that some of the requirements they've kind of adjusted some of the requirements this year. So make sure you take a look at that and make sure that it pertains to you. If there are other funding opportunities that you're aware of in your community, put them in the chat. Let folks know. We want everyone to be aware of what's happening and be able to tap into opportunities. Okay, I'm going to talk very, very briefly about the federal government, mostly just to say there's too much to talk about at the federal government. So we're going to do a separate webinar to talk about this because we're easily going to be able to spend a whole nother hour talking about this, and we just don't have enough time within our Cultural Futures presentation to talk about it. So we hope you'll join us on July 8th at noon. It's on Zoom, of course. Even if you can't attend at that time, but you are interested in this topic, register, and I will be sure to send you the recording afterwards. So you can scan this QR code to register. You can also just go to our website under the events tab, and you can also register there. Okay, I will acknowledge that we are now at time for our presentation. So if cultural access is something that is interesting to you and to your region, perhaps you don't have one, feel free to stick around if you want to learn more.
Yeah.
We're going to take about the next 10 minutes to talk about this.
Well, actually, it would be really helpful for me because I looked at everyone that still remains in this room, and the vast majority I know are in King County, so which of course
okay.
has a cultural access program. So it really varies what's most important for people to hear. Is anyone? So my direct question is: anyone in this Zoom room not in a community that has a cultural access program? So we're talking anyone that is not in King County, Tacoma, the city of Olympia, Vancouver, and San Juan County. All right. Well, I'm going to be able to save you a little bit of time then. So all of you are really, so Jesse and I travel across the state. We have 26 of these presentations. And of course, you can imagine the very different conversation when we are in Ferry County or the Methow Valley, places that want cultural access programs. Versus the conversation we have where there is a cultural access program. So what I'm going to share right now is inclusive of any community you're in that has a cultural access program, but I recognize most of you are from King County that are being served by Doors Open. Of course, what a wonderful thing. We know that cultural access is delivering in your community transformative resources, and we're so grateful for that. So for those of you who have cultural access program, here's just the top line things you need to know. One, we didn't talk about it in our priority list because it's an ongoing perennial priority. Your cultural access program is authorized because of underlying legislation, right? That the state legislature created, right? It sets the rules and the framework for your Doors Open program or your Tacoma Creates program or Inspire Olympia's program, for example. So therefore, we are always during the legislative session paying attention to that legislation and any opportunity or any circumstance where a lawmaker wants to open up the bill or make some changes because it will affect what happens to your program. So that's something that we always do. And right now, I'm not very concerned about that, but I never know what's going to happen in the next legislative session. People may have ideas. They may want to open up the legislation, and then all of a sudden we have to share our money with a different industry. That's not something I'm worried about right now. But I will tell you, if you are funded by a cultural access program, that if we send out an action alert and says, hey, the underlying legislation is being reconsidered, then we need all of you and more people actually to reach out to the lawmakers, and we would direct you in that effort. So that's one thing you just need to do. It's not something we're worried about, but just keep it in mind that if we reach out because of concerns around any potential tampering with the underlying legislation, then we will need everyone to respond to that. For those of you, so our next Tacoma reauthorized last year. The next reauthorization is the City of Olympia in 2028. And in 2030, Doors Open will need to be reauthorized. So keep in mind that these programs aren't forever, right? They have a 7-year authorization window. So therefore, it's really important that people activate and advocate during the reauthorization process if you want to keep those funds flowing. We learned a lot with our first reauthorization in Tacoma. Certainly, the city of Tacoma was excited about reauthorizing their program, but in the reauthorization, it may not have been a question of will they or won't they, but it really became a question of what does a new program look like. So I'm certain that you're going to want to be engaged as an advocate in the reauthorization of your program to make sure that it still lines up in a way that serves your program best. So that's just my way of saying be involved. We were really fortunate to have so many people advocate during the authorization of Inspire Olympia and the authorization of Doors Open, and we're going to need you again. This is something that we're going to have to do together. For example, here are the things that kind of I have to keep on my mind is who will be on the councils of these communities when the programs are reauthorized. Really, it will really matter that the councils are supportive. And that is why all the elections for King County Council, the City Council for Olympia, City Council for Vancouver, and the County Council for San Juan County. Why those elections matter, because it's going to start to cast the council that will make the decisions about reauthorization. Another thing that we're going to have to pay attention to is we can't imagine what the sentiment will be within communities. We were really thrilled that our last 3 cultural access programs were authorized with councilmanic authority. But what will be the thinking and the sentiments of communities about taxes being passed without a public vote in 2028 and in 2030, right? I know that thinking specifically about Doors Open, that would, if we were deferred to the voters, that would be a very expensive and complicated campaign to convince the communities, 39 cities and towns, that the majority of them have to support the reauthorization of cultural access. So these are the types of things that are in our mind. Bottom line, right now, I am optimistic about the renewal of all of our cultural access programs, but I want to tell you, we cannot take that for granted. Inspire Washington is thinking about this all the time, looking towards the future, making sure we're being prepared. And I'm just telling you right now that we'll need all of you to advocate so that we can keep this vital funding flowing. So pay attention to those reauthorizations and stay in touch with Inspire Washington so we can all work collectively to get these programs reauthorized. And it is about equity in Washington. These cultural access programs have tremendous resources, but there's so many communities that don't. And that's why it's important to advocate for state funding for all of Washington so that there is public funding for programs, especially those that aren't in King County, Tacoma, Olympia, Vancouver, and San Juan.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Oh, I forgot to share the final slide. I just realized. Thank you all so much for coming and staying with us through all of this. I just want to share that we do have a party coming up. I'm really excited to share about that. It's our summer party and fundraiser. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. We would love for you to join us if you're able. It's on July 30th up in North Seattle. But the link.
Hey, Danielle, I see your question. You can find out more information about cultural access on our inspirationleague.org website. But you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to tell you more. I'm not sure what the context of your question is. If you are in a community that doesn't have a cultural access program and you want to talk about kind of developing a campaign for that, or if there's just more that you want to learn about the cultural access in your program. So you can certainly, if you'd like to chat right now, I have some time, or you can reach out to me by email, Manny@inspirewashington.org.